Welcome to the Wednesday, July 12th edition of the PFF Forecast. We are continuing with the all-elusive division betting previews. We've got the AFC North on the docket for today. For Brad and I, we also have a conspiracy corner at the end of the pod, which is going to be fantastic. It's going to be a great show. Well, let's rock. Brad, you were talking to me about the Scottish Open, betting the Scottish Open before this. Maybe we get some picks in that. But I have to know, did you bet any of Major League Baseball All-Star Weekend? I got to be honest with you, I didn't even know it was happening. I turned on the TV, saw that they were making a big deal as they usually do out of the Home Run Derby, and then the All-Star game itself, which is just the most boring thing on earth. But did you find it in your degenerate self to bet it at all?
We're good baseball haters, as I think we've established that we both are. I do usually love the home run derby, but I'm with you. It came out of nowhere. Like, I think I was driving in the car, and all of a sudden someone was like, "Hey, Adley Rutschman," which was pretty cool, by the way, where he went lefty and then righty and hit like 6 dongs in a row as a righty,
Yep.
which was probably cool. But I had no idea it was happening until maybe it's my fault, but for as much time as I spend on Twitter, I think I would have seen like an advertisement for the home run derby.
Yeah, well, especially if you're hitting 6 dongs in a row, that's probably newsworthy content. Yeah, I didn't see anything about it. I also I think part of it, I didn't see any really notable names that were doing it. They didn't have like a Shohei or Judge wasn't in it, was he? Yeah, at least I didn't see that he was. So I don't know. It's tough. Baseball is in a tough spot. I'm shocked that the pitch clock did not solve all of baseball's problems. Something that has a lot of power that may be able to solve baseball's problems by keeping you from betting on baseball is the PFF Printing Press Discord, which is totally free to join. And if you are looking for things to bet where you can actually feel confident and enjoy the thesis that you have, you should go jump in there. They've got a lot of people that are betting WNBA, Ben Brown leading that charge with his model, but people betting all sorts of things. I'm still searching, Brad, for the elusive tennis, savant, tennis sharp. If you are a tennis sharp, that'd be great if you could join by this weekend, because I would love a reason to. I've been watching Wimbledon. I just don't really know what to bet. So I'm abstaining. But the link to join is in the YouTube description, the YouTube channel, which, by the way, if you haven't subscribed to, please do. It helps us keep the show going. And we'll help you find the show whenever you want. And we also tweet out the Discord link with the show on Twitter. So definitely go join that. We will be giving away, Brad. Maybe I should have led with this. We're going to be giving away merch every single Sunday. So I have got an order out for printing press hats. They're pretty sweet. They've got a printer emoji on them. People will ask you about them. You'll say, "I can't tell you about it." Or else I'd have to kill you. And we'll be giving them away every Sunday up until the start of the season. So jump in and get yourself a hat. Well, we'll put some on sale as well. Okay. With that said, let's get into the AFC North. And as we did with the AFC East, which we started with on Sunday, which you can go check out if you haven't already. We're going to start with the just division odds, and then we'll talk about the interesting components and the different bets that we can place across this division. So AFC North, as it stands right now, I'm pulling these from the DraftKings Sportsbook. Cincinnati Bengals are plus 150. The Baltimore Ravens are plus 220. The Cleveland Browns are plus 425. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are plus 450. So to translate that into implied probability, the Bengals are 40%. The Baltimore Ravens are 31%. The Cleveland Browns are 19%. The Pittsburgh Steelers are 18%. If you have a percentage in your model or your mind that is higher than that, you should bet on that team to win the division, or you have an edge on betting that team to win the division. I'll also point out that you can bet particular season finishes. So you could bet, for example, the Baltimore Ravens to finish in second. So if you're running like a simulation at home, you can kind of look at those probabilities. But I will shut up now, Brad. The question I have for you is which of these probabilities are the most off in your opinion and why?
Yeah, I mean, I know you're not going to like this answer in any way, shape, or form. You already know where I'm going, but look, I mean, I'm a simple man. I'm a dollars and cents individual. The most expensive roster in the entire NFL, not just in 2023, not just in 2024, but over the next 3 seasons, is the Cleveland Browns, and they are plus 425 to win their own division. Yes, they're the Browns. Yes, there are still question marks, but for me, the Bengals, I think, are the class of the division. They should be the favorite. The Ravens, I think, similar to the Bills for me. I like the team, but they are fragile. And I think the fragility there, particularly on defense, when I have concerns about Baltimore, I don't think their price should be as strong as it is. I get the positivity. I get some of the additions they've made, but their defensive line is kind of a question mark at this point. Their secondary is a bigger question mark, outside of a couple studs across that unit. There are certainly some questions at number 2 corner in the slot, etc. So unless Kyle Hamilton plays there. But anyway, long answer short, it's my favorite division bet. I think it's by far the best value division bet on the board. Ben Brown has them winning 10 wins in his projected model. He has them with the 10th easiest strength of schedule. They get the AFC South and the NFC West, which the NFC West, yes, you get 2 tough games. You also get 2 very, very easy games. With the AFC South, you get 3 easy games. They play the Bears. I just, like they might not win it, but I think it is the best value divisional bet in the entire NFL right now.
Are you I guess does this mean you've got your jersey ready to go? Are you going to embody the team? Do you have some threads to wear every weekend to dress up as the QB himself?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I maybe that long the jersey with the 1,000 names of quarterbacks on it is a more respectable jersey than that one. I'd rather have all 50 of those names than one. But yeah, look, I got some friends that are Dog Pound members, the Factory of Sadness, they call it, if they're listening. And maybe it's another year of the Factory of Sadness, but they're doing all they can to be a good football team.
Yeah, I was joking, obviously. Brad is a good human being, unlike the quarterback of the team that you just mentioned. But I have to respect that call because on paper, it's really, really hard to make an argument that that's not the obvious answer. If you compare, and I mentioned this the last podcast, I like to compare teams in similar spots. The Cleveland Browns having a 19% chance to win this division and the Pittsburgh Steelers having an 18% chance to win this division is bananas. Now, how do you get to that place? I think the only way you can get to that place is if you're like me and you look at the quarterback that's playing for the Browns and you go, this dude is a horrible person and karma's against him and he played worse than Jacoby Brissett last year. And you can have a great supporting cast, but if your quarterback sucks that much, you are going to lose games and you're not going to have a chance at winning the division. But that said, the ceiling for Deshaun Watson is not that far off. You could argue just a couple of years ago, the ceiling for Deshaun Watson was higher than either Burrow or Jackson. And if he even approaches that, the strength of this team on both sides of the ball is commensurate, I think, with all the other teams out there. The biggest question mark to me about the Browns is the receiving core. But Brad, you know me, you know the level of detail that I go to for the printing press, for the people out there. It's not just the numbers that we capture on the field, which we, of course, look into. It is also what's happening off the field. And I've been an observer, Brad, of what Deshaun Watson is doing because of all of the allegations and all that stuff. I'm very interested. What's he like? What's his social media persona? All these different things. He's got a girlfriend that stuck with him through the allegations. It's a very interesting. I recommend people checking it out because it's interesting the kind of things that he is posting and things obviously he's not. One thing that he did post, he and his girlfriend and Amari Cooper and his girlfriend went out and enjoyed a nice dinner together. It seems that they are tight. I see Amari Cooper. This is rejuvenation of Amari Cooper, a guy that has killed man coverage. We talked about him as one of the most underrated receivers out there. He played well last year. If Deshaun Watson didn't suck, I think we'd all be talking about Amari Cooper, a guy that was a bona fide number one wide receiver just a couple of years ago. And by all, I mean, it's not like he's, had some career-ending injury. So while that seems like a weakness, I think it could turn into a really good duo, and they could have a really good connection if what I'm observing on social media or any indication. And that to me really does put them over the top. I guess quarterback, is quarterback the question mark? Is that the reason they're at 19%? Or is there something that I'm missing?
I think, well, first of all, I was as confident that you were going to hate the pick for the, not hate the, I mean, I'm being facetious, but I also knew that juxtaposing their odds with the Pittsburgh Steelers was also going to be your biggest proponent while you liked it. I knew that was coming the entire time. But I do think people also have questions, and I know you'll agree with me on this, about their defense. And look, they were 17th in EPA per play allowed last year, in particular, horrible against the run, and something I pulled before the show that I thought was interesting. They were actually 12th in success rate allowed. So allowing some explosives, I think, was the bigger issue than being bad on a down by down basis. But you and I know that that is, there is variance there. They also made massive expenditures pretty much exclusively on the defensive side of the ball. They were horrible against the run in particular. They should get a lot of health back at the linebacker core. You add Dalvin Tomlinson, who has had a run defense grade above 70 every season of his career, into the fold there. I think that's a question mark too. And for me, this is where you ignore like who they played last year and who their division is. They faced a pretty good slate of opposing quarterbacks. Yes, they lost to Joe Flacco and a couple other games, but like that, if you break it down, the defense is pretty talented, and they added more talent. And I think people are overestimating how much that's going to matter in 2023.
The reason that we talk about defense, quote, not mattering, I don't want to get into this, but when we did bring that up, the reason for that is not that it doesn't matter, but it's very hard to predict. And so if you are making a case on something because of what you've seen in the past about a defense, there's so many factors that you have to take into consideration. It's very hard to predict. We actually talked about this with the Dolphins last week. They have a ton of new pieces. Thinking their defense can be anything similar to what it was last year is just insane, right? And I think the same is true with the Browns for a few reasons. I'm looking to pull this up as we do this, but Ward was injured last year. Am I right in saying that? I feel like they had a fair number of injuries, and I think that there's a lot that we're probably underestimating a little bit with how well that they have drafted over the course of the years as well, and they've invested in that secondary. So if they get a little bit better variance there, it'll be a solid defense. The other thing that I think is noteworthy, and this is not a Browns podcast, so we can transition into talking about the other two teams at the top and the Steelers as well. There is this, they play well against the Bengals, kind of situation that will help them, I think. And they match up nicely, I think, against the Bengals, if anyone does. Because of the strengths that they have, particularly with Myles Garrett, for example, against the kind of not great offensive line that the Bengals have, but they also have some strong corners and some strong players in the secondary, and I think that is obviously going to be extremely crucial. And here's the interesting thing: Denzel Ward had his lowest graded season of the year of his career by a mile. He was the 11th highest graded corner in 2021. He was 88th last year. So, it speaks to, it looks like he played, he got injured in week, I think 5 it was. He didn't come back till week 10, but, was probably not himself for the entirety of the season, because that grade is just totally different than what you would expect. And we know that there's a lot of variance when it comes to cornerback play. Strong defensive line, as we mentioned, and the offensive line really, really strong. I mean, their lowest graded offensive player was Deshaun Watson last year, if you look at their starting lineup. So, I think it really does go to show. But let's talk a little bit about the Bengals and the Ravens, though. How do you kind of compare and contrast those teams in relation to themselves and also the Browns?
Yeah, so the Ravens, and I'll tie it to the Browns. Just one last thought. These markets are not out yet, but coordinator of the year, I think there's one on both sides of the ball. Maybe there's just one, but anyway, I think there's going to be a narrative behind Jim Schwartz in Cleveland if their defense gets much better, even though a lot of it will be health. And I also think in Baltimore, if this offense comes out and is flying, that Todd Monken is going to be a very popular offensive coordinator or coordinator of the year pick. So my thoughts with Baltimore is I do think it is a very talented roster. They now have 7 guys making at least $14 million a year, second in the NFL. They obviously have the highest paid player in NFL history now, Lamar Jackson. I mentioned earlier the defensive line. You lose Calais Campbell, you lose Justin Houston, and yeah, they played like 400 snaps each last year, but they were impact snaps. And now you have rookies and sophomores pretty much across your entire defensive line, or third-year players. Like, it's all rookie contract guys. And then, in the secondary, yes, Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton can play in the slot, so maybe he stays there with the presence of Marcus Williams. But Rock Ya-Sin, they signed in like June, and he's their number 2 corner. They're kind of question marks beyond that. My concern with Baltimore is, unlike Cleveland, I think the depth is a little bit scary. They're fragile, and if they lose a couple pieces, I think it could be not a catastrophe, but I think it could really hamstring them. Whereas Cleveland, I think, because of last year, focused on, hey, if we lose a couple guys here and there, we can overcome it. And I think Cincinnati also has been phenomenal in adding depth, drafting players at positions they're already good at, so that they just don't have a drop off. And I think they did a good job again of that this offseason.
It's a good point, and there's so much variance for the Ravens because of the what the offense is going to look like. You just don't know there. And I could see a case to be made for, this is obviously going to be a competitive division, but the Ravens coming in, last in this division, I don't think is out of the realm of possibility. Just so much variance and the depth, to your point. It's hard to bet against John Harbaugh in those situations, but like, it's a very, very tricky one. The OBJ thing also adds more variance. He's going to get injured at some point. It just feels that way. Although I think I mentioned this in the past. OBJ and I use the same. He's a spokesman now for the protein supplement that I use. So I don't know if that means I'm about to get injured or he's about to get healthy. But one of those things is destined to happen. Let's talk about the Bengals a little bit here, because they were a team that continued to dominate the offseason. It feels like every year they're just kind of winning from the offseason perspective. How do they not win the division? Like, how is this team not dominant this year? It feels like Joe Burrow's continued to get better. The defense is rock solid. Like, Zach Taylor's starting to figure out to throw the ball more. Like how does it not work out for them?
Let's say, removing injuries, because it's an obvious answer. I do wonder if perhaps Lou Anarumo has been one of the best defensive coordinators in football. They do have a lot of talent, but maybe you would argue not like the best talent standpoint. Just, it's a weak link system and they don't really have holes on this defensive unit. And they've had relative health. Last year, the injury bug hit them a little bit. But I think for me, it's maybe teams and quarterbacks figuring out how to play. In particular, for me, the one that sticks out is Josh Allen, when they would just drop 8 against him, and he really didn't know what to do against it. I mean, he is our leading passer against the blitz and against pressure each of the last 2 seasons, which just like should not happen. It's a very unstable statistic, but when you just you bring 3 rushes and just sit back, he tends to struggle, as they did against the Bengals last year in 1.5 football games. I'm thinking Anarumo's been so good that I think some opposing AFC head coaches and offensive play callers are going to start saying, like, what is he doing that's giving us so many problems? How can we exploit it? Their secondary now is not, there are some question marks or some guys they need to play good football that maybe haven't shown that much in the past, or coming off an injury. That, I think, for me is the biggest one, is just, their defense gets more respect than it's had the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a very good point. It'd be interesting to see, how many people copycat that. It's obviously very successfully against the Bills. We're going to talk about the biggest weaknesses across each of these teams here in a second, in addition to the strengths we've covered. Before we do, reminder, and there's a lot of you out there, members of the printing press, who, maybe parents, maybe dog parents, maybe new parents, And your children, your family's well-being is probably your top priority. But you also want to spend time watching football in peace and quiet, with peace of mind this year. And so that means you need to make sure all of your family stuff is on lockdown. And one of the ways to do that is by getting good term life insurance. And you can do so now without all the hassle and rigmarole that you would expect comes with it, thanks to Fabric by Gerber Life. It's an app. You download it. You can go to the website, and you can get yourself a great quote for like nothing, no even investment of time. It's 10 minutes, and you can get that delivered to you in a way that you can trust, from a company you can trust, and you can all of a sudden get your family and your children in a great spot, and you can relax and watch some football. So here's what you do. You go to meetfabric.com/forecast and get yourself a quote in under 10 minutes, a quote that you can trust. That is meetfabric.com/forecast. The policies are issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, so we just talked about, I think, our favorite bet, and you brought it up, which is the Cleveland Browns. A lot of things that kind of add up there. But let's go back to the Browns. I think the obvious answer here is one that I've made. But what's the biggest kind of weak spot, and what's the biggest strength? Let's go around the horn with each of these teams. And let's start with the Browns.
Yeah, I mean, the Browns is the rust and chemistry between Kevin Stefanski and Deshaun Watson, and can they figure it out? You know, we talked with the defense. I think they've gotten much better. So, yeah, I think it's just the blending of two styles of a Stefanski wants the ball out quickly. Deshaun historically has had a above 3-second average time to throw. It's oil and water, and I don't know if they can figure it out. We'll find out.
That was going to be mine as well, which is we believe in Stefanski. What's another good example of this? We believe in Sean Payton. Sean Payton and Russell Wilson may not work out, right? That could happen. I think we generally trust in great quarterbacks that sort of figure it out, but I'm not sure Deshaun Watson is a great quarterback. Obviously they are the Browns, but here's, I think, the biggest weak spot. If Amari Cooper gets hurt, Deshaun Watson is throwing to me and you out there, and that's not great. And in order to keep up with the Bengals, right, at the end of the day, you're going to have to score. And I think the biggest worry I would have is, if Amari Cooper isn't firing on all cylinders, they're running the ball a ton, it's just going to be hard to score a ton of points for the Browns. I think that's the biggest limitation. Let's go to the Baltimore Ravens. Biggest strength, biggest weakness.
Strength for me is the additions in the receiving core. I don't think we can understate, maybe not one individually, but not only adding Odell on his supplements that you take, but also bringing in Zay Flowers. And then Rashad Bateman was lost for the season, week 3 last year? Like, you're basically adding him in too. So I think it's just all the weapons you add in on top of Mark Andrews. I think you can now view that as the strength, good offensive line. For me, I'll go back to it. I mean, I just need to see it from Justin Madubuike, Odafe Oweh, David Ojabo obviously had the Achilles, but this entire young defensive line just hasn't really proven much. Travis Jones, maybe they will. I mean, the Ravens have historically developed guys that spot, but it could be the downfall of this entire team.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, the biggest weakness and their biggest strength is Lamar Jackson. And I mean that in the best way possible, which is if he gels with Todd Monken, if Monken kind of figures out how to get the most out of him, then there's no reason we can't see Lamar Jackson MVP this year. And I think that is, kind of leaning into a bet that I may talk about here in a second. But the downside of that is, I think, a pretty ugly one, where I could see if it doesn't get off to a good start, it just not really not working out. There's something about, everything's all kind of good because Lamar got paid, but it is a totally new kind of way of doing things. And I feel like that may not work out. I'm not sold on the communication between those guys is going to be great. So I think the ceiling is super high. I think the floor is pretty low, weirdly, for a John Harbaugh team. Cincinnati Bengals, biggest strength, biggest weakness.
The weapons in Cincy, you're just not going to beat a trio of wide receivers like that. I guess I'll sort of contradict myself. I do think if Irv Smith gets hurt at tight end, you basically don't have a tight end that is a threat on the roster. You retain Drew Sample, a guy they took in the second round a couple of years. That was one of the weirder second round picks in a long time, I guess, before they were elite at drafting. But if Irv Smith gets hurt, which he is unfortunately prone to do, you basically are going to have defenses just not even covering your tight end, and it changes the dynamic of your offense a little bit.
Yeah. It's a really, really good point. The biggest weakness that I see is honestly how full of themselves they seem to be. I think that is their biggest weakness because, you come in with this whole kind of like Burrowhead baloney and, the line is true. You come with the king, you best not miss. And they missed. And to me, that is going to be that's just going to be in the back of their minds. It's going to be in the back of, they've got nothing to prove from winning the division. It's all about, can they beat the Chiefs? And Joe Burrow was the best passer, had the highest grade, I think highest EPA per play, throwing quick last year. And I think the biggest weakness is, again, to borrow a page out of what I just said, like that could be their biggest strength because their offensive line stinks. But it could be their biggest weakness because if teams catch on to that, and every team is going to be watching, them closely, what did they do? They beat the Bills, all this stuff. Then all of a sudden, it could be something that becomes a huge challenge for them because teams look to kind of stop that. Now it's easier said than done with Higgins, Boyd, and Chase, obviously. But I think that's going to be, a huge challenge. So really, that offensive line, not being good. And they've, got some pieces there. So it's a chance that it's average. And if it's average, I think they're fine. But if it's really bad, teams may know how they beat them last year, and they may really work to fight against that. Let's talk about the Steelers now. Biggest strength, biggest weakness for the Steelers.
Yeah, biggest weakness I'll start with is offensive coordinator Matt Canada. I mean, they were dead last in play action rate last year. They've been to the bottom the last couple of years. I think they actually used a little bit more motion, but still not a ton. And you just watch the offense. It's clunky. The plays don't really seem like they're sequenced. It's kind of just throwing darts at the wall. And yes, they had a rookie quarterback, but I really just 18 teams, I think the number was, maybe even more than that, changed offensive coordinators. I am not frankly sure how the Steelers aren't on that list, with all due respect. The strength, I think, for me is the defensive line. Already a very, very good unit. And TJ Watt missed a bunch of time. You add Keanu Benton in the draft. You have recent draft picks like DeMarvin Leal and other guys working their way into the fold. You retain Larry Ogunjobi. Cam Hayward is maybe the most underrated player of the last 5+ years. I think this defensive line is going to take over games and single-handedly win some games for the Steelers.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think the biggest strength for the Pittsburgh Steelers, this surprised absolutely no one, is Mike Tomlin. And, there's some good coaches in this division, obviously, but it's weird to say that because it's hard to point to like one specific thing, right, with Mike Tomlin. But it is we talk about like the Ravens culture and all the stuff, that the Steelers culture, as someone has tweeted this out before, where it's like the simple fact that Mike Tomlin kept Antonio Brown like on the team performing well for like 5+ seasons is, insane. And, he did that. So I think that's their biggest strength. The biggest weakness is Kenny Pickett. And the reason it's the biggest weakness is in comparison to the quarterbacks at all of the other on all the other teams in this division. He could be good, and he was good last year towards the end. He finished 18th in PFF grade at 75.5. But if he does that again this year, then it's going to be the biggest delta between them and the rest of the other teams. That's a fact because of how good the quarterbacks in the other teams in this division can be. And it doesn't give him a chance to compete unless he can get himself up to being a top 10 quarterback. And I just don't, I don't know about that. So I think that's their biggest weakness. Before we get to this next topic, I want to remind everyone that if you are out there and you're thinking, man, doldrums of the off season, how do I get involved in football? Go to DraftKings Sportsbook, which you know them for, but they have a best ball tournament that they're running with $10 million in guaranteed cash prizes. And here's the great thing. You can draft your heart away without worrying about having to manage these teams during the season, because all you do is pick the players and then let them sit and they play the best players that score the most points each week. So it's super easy to do, and it's great prep for your redraft leagues. And here's the best part. you use promo code PFF for your chance to win $1 million top prize, and you get your first entry fee back in DraftKings dollars. It's promo code PFF when you sign up to play the best ball contest in the land, the Best Ball Millionaire contest. Promo code PFF, you get your first entry back in DraftKings dollars. Easy as that. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER, one per customer, opt-in required with $10 entry fee. Bonus issued as 10 DK dollars. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com/promotions for details. Ends 7/14/23. All right, let's talk some bets. Favorite bet to make outside of the Division One that we just talked about within this division, Brad? What is it?
Yeah, so I have two actually for both the Steelers. They were my Steelers bets, but I'll throw them in here. So one is, not trying to hate on the guy. I wrote an article already about him this offseason. That is Pittsburgh Steelers edge defender Alex Highsmith. He had 14.5 sacks last year. His pass rush win rate of 11% was 62nd out of 79 edge rushers with at least 250 pass rush snaps. So he just had an uncharacteristically exorbitantly high sack, conversion rate. That is not obviously a stable thing. It's probably not going to happen year over year. He certainly does benefit from Cam Hayward and TJ Watt chasing guys into his lap, but I just don't see him repeating that number. You look at the underlying numbers, they're not strong. So I think you get a good price at under 9.75 sacks is minus 120 on DraftKings. So I like that one. On the flip side, the over 825.5 receiving yards for Deontay Johnson. Look, Chase Claypool, not that he was a superstar, but they did trade him away at the deadline. So I know they brought in Allen Robinson, but I think realistically, there's maybe less competition or same competition for Johnson. All the dude does is go out there and get 150 targets in a season. He's topped this number two, I think every year, the last 3 or 4 years. It's like he's not going to go for 1,500 anytime soon, but he is a consistent, super high volume guy. He's going to have 10 catches for 80 yards, a bunch of games. I like him to go over 825.5 yards here.
Yeah, I like both of those. I have a Steelers bet, ironically, here as well, and that is comeback player of the year. We've talked about this award a few times, and Damar Hamlin is minus 500. I get it. But also, I could see a scenario where, if he doesn't play, it's kind of a, forgotten thing. And by the time the season ends, TJ Watt, on the other hand, we know is going to play. He's 35-1. And when he is on the field, he is dominant. But here's the thing. I think it's going to be hard for him to win Defensive Player of the Year. I think the edge defender is such a talented group. I think Myles Garrett probably deserved it last year. Like Parsons gets more airtime than any other defender on the planet. So it's going to be hard for him to win that. But he could put up a super impressive season. He is a player that people do love because of the last name, right? So he's going to get some shine. I think 35-1, you consider all the players ahead of him. The only one that really concerns me is Damar Hamlin. Everyone else that's ahead of him, I just don't think is that worrisome. So I like TJ Watt, 35-1. Am I stupid for fading the Damar Hamlin prohibitive favorite to be comeback player of the year?
I don't know. I mean, if he plays one snap, he probably wins it, but we talked about it on the pod. I think it's worth playing, and I do like the TJ Watt shout. I think people do forget. I put an article today, but from 2019 to 2021, so 3 years before last year, he had the most pressures and the most defensive stops of any edge rusher by, I think, more than 10 in both categories. Like he was absurd for 3 years, before the injury last year.
Yeah, he's been absurd. And when he has played, the team has also been a lot better, and people cite that stat a lot. I could see that, showing up quite a bit. The other thing that he has going for him is, you mentioned Deshaun Watson and his time to throw. Lamar Jackson also historically has a very high time to throw. Joe Burrow gets rid of the ball super quickly, but having two players that you're facing twice a season each who hold on to the ball for a while, that adds up. That gives you a lot more of an opportunity. We talk about this all the time. Quarterbacks own so much of their pressure and sack rate because holding on to the ball is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, determinant of, can you get pressure? Can you get a sack? So I think he has that going for him quite a bit. Speaking of Lamar Jackson, he's 15-1 to win MVP. I think it's a shot that you might want to sprinkle on. I think the upside is just humongous. The downside is also massive. And so I don't like betting on the Ravens just to like go over or under their win total. I think they're better if you're going to play like an alt. So the flip side of that would be under 7.5 wins. It's plus 400. I hate fading the Ravens just because of how good of an organization they are. But I agree with you in terms of the volatility being super high here. The other one that I'll mention, Amari Cooper over 950.5 receiving yards. We talked about the Browns a bunch. And my kind of hypothesis there around Amari Cooper, how good he is against man coverage. He's going to be the only guy worth targeting in that passing game. They need to get their money's worth out of Deshaun Watson. He needs to throw the ball more. He needs to be more successful. He's got everything setting up for him to do that. And the relationship that I've seen between him and Amari Cooper makes me think that, he targeted the living crap out of DeAndre Hopkins, right? I see something very similar here, except honestly, Amari Cooper is a better separator. So it should be something that he's able to win with pretty significantly. So the ones I like. Of those, which one do you like best, Brad?
Do you with playing the volatility of the Ravens of either going alt under or alt over? I know Ben Brown likes their standard under, so maybe you get cheeky and go with an alt and things just don't work out in the first year. But it is a little bit scary with Harbaugh. But I agree that is how you should play that team.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. Okay, one of the things that we liked most about the first division preview was a narrative that no one is talking about, or that we're not talking enough about, that we could see playing out in this division. I will let you go first. What's the undercover narrative that maybe by the end of the season we're going, duh, we should have seen this coming?
Interesting. I mean, shoot, maybe it is, the Pittsburgh Steelers are back and they figured it out. We get Matt Canada and Kenny Pickett. If they can figure things out, and Pat Frymuth was on part of my take talking recently about how shrunken down the playbook is and how they did nothing last year and everything was kind of the same. If that changes, they quietly have a very, I think, good unit on both sides of the football, and maybe they just sneak their way. I don't know about division win, but I don't know, like 11 wins and get it in as a wild card. Is that the underrated narrative?
Yeah, it's hard. I struggled with this because it's like, it's a fairly frequently talked about division, and it's like kind of hard to find an area of these teams that it is sort of undercover. One that came to mind for me was, quite frankly, was something that you talked about with the Browns earlier, which is just how I think impressive the defense and the defensive line in particular can be for that team. I think we're talking about it with the Steelers as we normally do. We talk about it with the Bengals because of the great job that they've done kind of building talent, putting talent on that team. But I think that's the piece with the Browns that is really interesting. Myles Garrett was the highest graded edge defender last year, 92.5. Dude was an absolute maniac, complete savage. You look at the left tackles across this division, you're not scared of any of them. So, and certainly not if you're Myles Garrett. Regression with Denzel Ward. So here's the narrative that I don't think people are talking about that I could see happening, which is Deshaun Watson does not return to being elite. He's actually more average, but somehow the Browns are playing, the Bengals at the end of the season for a chance to win the division because of, the kind of flip flop that you alluded to for what that defense could do. The other narratives I just think are pretty straightforward, right? Like I think there's the Joe Burrow MVP narrative. I think that has a great chance of happening. I think Jamar Chase going off, T. Higgins being amazing, like all those things. People are even talking about the kind of Kenny Pickett stuff. Obviously, we talked about the Ravens an absolute crap ton. So this was really the only one I could come up with that like semi-different. And sadly feels very similar to my one last week with the Dolphins. Although I liked your bet of Jalen Phillips more than anything that I could come up with here.
Point though, this division, there isn't really a lot undercover. Like the Steelers are the least talked about team, and they're one of like the franchises that the country covers 24/7. Yeah. So it's just out in the open.
Yeah, it's tough. Speaking of being out in the open, if you are out in the open, Brad, and it's summer, so people might want to get out in the open. A well manicured body is important. Okay, I've already extolled the virtues of getting your daily protein in, as my guy OBJ does. But you also don't want to have just, body hair all over the place. Your facial hair is all out of whack. Don't do that to yourself. So go to our friends at Manscaped and get yourself groomed and ready for smooth sack summer. If you're not ready yet, I mean, you've got a few weeks here. Okay. You can still get it together. I still believe in you. Promo code PFF gets you 20% off plus free shipping. It's a really good deal. There are two Manscaped products that I use. I use the new kit, which is for the facial hair. Whether you have a beard, I don't really have a beard, Brad, but you and I both try to keep it, tight with the facial hair. You still need some tooling. It's like, I think, underrated. You got to have some things that, can keep the length right. You don't want to be dealing with 75 different clip-ons and all this crap. And you don't need to do that with Manscaped. There's one, you adjust it. Super great product. Comes with all the beard oils if that's your thing. Even gives you some scissors to really get crazy with it. And then the Lawnmower 4.0, which is for the body hair. It won't nick you. Super long battery life. You can travel with it without bringing a charger. Super durable. Has a little light. You can use it in the shower. Great product. So PFF is the promo code, 20% off plus free shipping. Get yourself a little smooth sack summer. All right. Conspiracy. By the way, how'd I do there? How'd you like the transition? How'd I do the sell? You like it?
The segues, you've been like, your ears are perked when I'm talking, and I appreciate it because you're ready to pounce at a moment's notice. I mean, the 6 dongs in a row, the Mariah Mills special, nothing's getting past you these days.
Nothing is getting past me today. Although hopefully those get past me if they come at me. Let's talk about Conspiracy Corner. So this is a new segment that we've been doing. It took a couple of weeks off. We are back with a betting Conspiracy Corner. This is kind of a twist on it. So how desperate are sports books for people's money is a very good question. There's not a lot to bet on. As we've talked about, we really want some people who can talk tennis. So we can bet on that. Bovada put up this market, which you found. First country to find alien life. All right, here are the odds. The United States of America, our great country, 12-1. China, 15-1. India, Russia, also 15-1. Brazil, 18-1, as is Indonesia and Nigeria. North Korea, Pakistan are 20-1. Bangladesh, Japan, Mexico, and the Philippines are 30-1. And Switzerland is 40-1. First off, Brad, how in the living hell does anyone price this? What are the mechanisms by which you are pricing this market?
I think the pricing, in my opinion, might actually be easier than your terms and conditions for how you cash the bet. So for pricing, I probably would just simply Google what percentage of the GDP or how much money does each country invest in their NASA or NASA equivalent, and probably just reverse price it that way. My question is, if Kim Jong-un gets up to a podium and says that he found an alien, like, is Bovada sending me money or not? Like, that's what I want to know.
That was my question. The fact that you could have like a nation on here where if they said something, you could put like odds that it's true and the odds would be very low is extremely surprising to me. Quite frankly, I'm disappointed that the US is only 12-1. That to me signifies a real lack of confidence in the country. Frankly, it has me worried about the entire. Yeah, I'm just kidding. I'm going to go fade the market now because we just saw. 12-1 seems like a little lame. I kind of like 12-1. Like, I don't know. We have to have the most advanced stuff out there. We've got to be in the driver's seat. We have like all of our billionaires, like every billionaire except for the one who's like current, desire is to like displace Twitter. Every other one is trying to get to space. I just saw something. I don't know if it's true or not, but some country, I won't name it, not to shame anybody, but claimed that they could get to the sun. And someone like responded with like, how could you like get anything on the sun? Like it's very, very hot. I don't know if you know that. And the response was, well, we'll just go at night.
There it is. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That wasn't the Twitter guy. That was somebody else.
Someone else. But that country, so I don't have a ton of faith in the space programs. So let me ask you this. What if you had to bet one of these, what's the best value? Any that are really overvalued in your opinion?
Yeah, I think Japan 30-1 is intriguing value there for sure. And I guess now that we've mentioned him a couple times, like, does Elon claim South Africa? If he was an Olympian, when he fights Mark Zuckerberg, is he wearing some South African garb, or does he describe himself as American at this point? That is intriguing to me as well.
The United States government spent almost 62 billion US dollars on its space programs in 2022, making it the country with the highest space expenditure in the world. The US was followed by China with government expenditure of space programs of almost 12 billion US dollars. So the US spent about 6 times as much as China. Their odds are basically the same. Japan was third in expenditure, which I think makes your bet very shrewd. You know what I don't see on this list? North Korea. Don't see them there. I think it's kind of ridiculous that they're that high. Like, can they even fly a plane? Like, legitimately curious. Like, how terrified would you be if you're like, yeah, this plane was built by North Korea? You get like a 1 in 8 shot of making it to your destination. Even if your destination is like just the runway. So,
I'd rather fly Spirit and that says a lot.
I'd rather fly like holding on to the wing of a Spirit airline than like first class in North Korea. Pakistan, Bangladesh. Like, in what world is that even one that you're putting ahead? Pakistan has better odds than Japan. Like, who built this market? I need to know. I think this is completely ridiculous. The US is the best bet at 12-1. Just based on simple math. 62 billion US dollars plus all of our billionaires with their like dick measuring contests trying to get there. We're going to land on some planet, meet some like weird looking thing, and we're going to call it an alien life form. That's another question that I have for you, Brad. How do we discover it? Does it come to Earth, or do we go to it?
I think even though there have been a lot of UFO sightings and apparently alien sightings and whatnot, I think we find, I know apparently in Mars, we recently found, I think it's like a chemical compound or an element that is historically only associated with life forms. I think we're going to we're going to go to their home base and maybe have a home and home.
Yes, I agree. Everyone's always wrong. Okay. The masses are always wrong. Everyone is so concerned about them coming to us. Okay. We're going to go find it. That's how it's going to happen. And it's going to be so disappointing. We have like all of these views of like how alien life forms like look and like there's some sort of humanoid. It's going to be like a freaking, like, it's going to be like a jellyfish, like on the ground. It's like, talking in, I don't know, some weird, it's like a jellyfish that barks like a dog or something like that. It's going to be super underwhelming, and they're going to be like not impressive, and there's going to be nothing to worry about. And it's going to be disappointing as hell. Thank you for joining Conspiracy Betting / Science Corner with Brad and I. We'll be putting our class on space exploration up on gumroad.com. You can go check it out. We'll be back with the AFC South next time, which I think will actually be more interesting to talk about. I felt like the AFC North, a lot of kind of has been just talked about so much. And some of these other divisions, like AFC East, was super interesting. I think the AFC South will actually have some interesting stuff to talk about. We talked about Trevor Lawrence, and maybe DeAndre Hopkins will sign with the Tennessee Titans by then, which is really just them capturing every kind of semi-washed skill position player that they possibly can.
Yeah, so we've probably covered this. Yeah. No, I was just gonna say real quick, we are a betting podcast. For some reason, DeAndre Hopkins went from like plus 500 to minus 300 to be a Titan. I'm sure we've discussed this podcast. Usually those odds are meaningless, but nevertheless, I did notice that.
Oh, would you say there's smoke where there's fire?
I haven't been able to hear anything personally, but I did see that.
We should see if Shams Charania tweets anything out, and that'll be the clue that we need.
There you go.
If the Titans are like the last place he should go. That doesn't make any sense to me. He's almost better off just hanging out with the Cardinals and waiting for Caleb Williams. Topic for next podcast. We'll be back on Sunday. We'll be giving out merch. So come hang out. We'll discuss in the Discord. You'll need to go to the Discord to be able to win some merch. So make sure you join, and then we'll discuss how to do so within the Discord channel. There's a special message board or whatever it is about that. I'm not hip like the kids. Anyways, that's enough of me. Appreciate y'all. Love you. Peace.